Hello, today I'll be talking about my law school application process for the fall 2022 cycle. So if you're looking to apply for law school, hopefully this can give you some insight into the application process, whether you're applying for fall 2022 or way in the future. Today I'll be talking about the research component, the LSAT, the rest of your application, as well as logistics. So in order, that is deciding where to apply, how to get above a 155 on the LSAT, figuring out what else you need to be competitive, and finally when to apply and who to talk to if you have any questions. Although hopefully this video can answer most of yours. I mentioned what, who, where, when, how, but I didn't talk about why. So why are you interested in pursuing a legal education? This question is super important to reflect upon, not only because law school is a commitment for sure, but also because it will show up on your personal statements. For example, these are questions on the Osgoode Hall Law School app. So yeah, make sure you know the answers. Why do you want to be a lawyer? About me, I am 20 years old, born in 2001. I'm graduating this upcoming spring with a Bachelor's of Arts in International Development. In the spirit of full transparency, I'll be sharing my LSAT and GPA. So my LSAT was a 164, and I took that in June. And my current GPA is a 3.87 once adjusted for OSAS. Although I am hoping to raise this to a 3.9 in my final year. So research, deciding where to apply. As you may or may not know, there are 24 law schools in Canada and 8 in Ontario. For me, as a citizen of Ontario, I wanted to stay in province, so I limited my search to these 8. To do my research, I went to lsac.org and read up on every law school. They have really comprehensive profiles there. I don't know how updated they are, but I thought they were good and they served my purposes. Although, of course, I recommend you go to the websites of each individual law school as well. While you're doing this, make sure that you're considering what kind of law you're most interested in, the tuition and cost of living, and experiential opportunities. My top 3 are Osgoode, Queens, and U Ottawa. I'm also interested in the dual degree programs that they have at each school. So for Osgoode, they have a Master's of Environmental Studies dual degree program. Queens, they have a Master of Public Administration. And, at University of Ottawa, they have a joint program with Carleton for a Master's of Arts in International Affairs. All right, on to the LSAT. So a strong disclaimer, I believe in self-study over LSAT prep courses, mostly because prep courses are hella expensive and they were totally out of the question for me. But there are also many benefits to self-studying. For example, you can learn at your own pace, because usually what works for the group doesn't work for the individual, right? You might be a little slower on some concepts, or you might learn some concepts like extremely fast. You can also save money, like I mentioned, and you can practice self-discipline, which is really important if you want to be successful in law school. Finally, the most important benefit is that there's room for experimentation. So usually prep courses, they'll teach you one method or one way of going about a question. But there are so many ways that you can look at a question and go about solving it. So I think that this is probably the best benefit or the greatest benefit of self-study. So my LSAT score was a 164, which means it's generally competitive for admission to Ontario law schools. As you can see, it's in the green part, and 155 is the beginning of the white part. So when you're in the white zone, you're probably okay to apply to law schools, although it will be a little more difficult for you because it's not as competitive, but you're still you still stand a decent chance. There are a lot of Osgoode students who had a sub 160. For uoft, it's probably impossible. I'm not even applying to uoft because I don't think my stats are good enough. But I think most other law schools in Canada, they'll make exceptions. But usually you want to be in the green zone, so that means aiming for a 160 and above. I know a lot of people on Reddit will say you should aim for a 180, but Come on, that's pretty unreasonable. So I think when you're first starting out, aiming for a 160 or a 155 is good enough, depending on how well you do on your diagnostic. For example, if you have a 145 on your diagnostic, maybe just aim for a 155. Or for me, when I had a 154, I aimed for a 160. So here's my timeline for studying for the LSAT. So I started in January 2020, which is when that was during my second semester of first year, which is pretty early, I know. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer or go to law school for a while since high school. So I knew I had the benefit of studying early. But I actually started like real studying around July 2020 and then intensely studying in January 2021. So I guess I had 6 months of actual intense studying before I took the LSAT, and I would say that most people need at least 6 months to study for the LSAT. And I know a lot of people want to cram it in 3, but it's nearly impossible if you're still in school and or working. So start studying right away. A lot of people take the LSAT after applying, but for me personally, as a very anxious person, this would not have worked for me because I would have been scared about getting a low score and wasting all that time and money on applications without, full knowledge of who I am, what law schools will see of me at least. So that's why I chose to do my LSAT before applying, so I know my stats, I know my chances, and it just relieves a little bit of anxiety. I'm not surprised by a poor LSAT mark. If you haven't even considered law school before your last year of undergrad, consider waiting until graduating to study and apply for law school because the process is really long, and honestly, managing your last year and studying for the LSAT seems like it would be very stressful. So at the end of the day, though, you know yourself best. So if you think you can handle it, go for it. But it is very stressful. Fair warning. So the very first thing you want to do is take a diagnostic. So you can go to Khan Academy or LSAC's Law Hub. Both of these are free. You don't have to pay money. Actually, I didn't spend a single cent on my LSAT studies, and I'm quite proud of that. Other than the LSAT test fee, of course. As I mentioned before, my diagnostic was a 154, which is a really strong diagnostic. At the beginning of my medium studying phase, I took a practice test on Khan Academy, and I had a 161, so that was after my light studying. So I made my goal of getting a 161, and so my next goal was a 165, and I surpassed that with a 167. Of course, I ended up with a 164 on the real LSAT, but that's probably because the real test has like this thing called the nerve factor. So, the conditions are different. There's a proctor watching you. It just, you feel it. It's different. So most people will say that you should expect a mark about 3 points less than your average PT. And at the end, I was averaging at a 169. I never broke 170, unfortunately, but I got many 169s and 168s. So, yeah, I ended up with a 164, which was disappointing for me, honestly, but it's still a very good score. And LSAC's Law Hub, they have LSAT prep tests, but they also have the LSAT Flex, which is the one I took in June because of the pandemic. I think the LSAT Flex is here to stay. So if you actually want to see what taking the LSAT actually feels like and looks like, please, please, please go check this out. It will make you so much more prepared for the real test. The LSAT has 3 sections, logic games, or analytical reasoning, logical reasoning, and reading comprehension. You want to identify your weak spot early. So for me, that was reading comprehension. I thought this was surprising because I'm an avid reader, and I thought this would be the easiest for me, and I thought analytical reasoning would be the hardest, but it actually turned out to be the opposite. So once I actually learned how to solve logic games, I was doing them very, very well. I got maybe 1 or 2 wrong, and then at the end I was getting like 0 I was getting perfect on this section. But for reading comprehension, oh my God, I was getting like -7, -8. It was bad. It was really bad. So yeah, I found my weak spot pretty early. Here are the books I used. So the very first book I ever touched was for the LSAT, not the first book I ever touched. It was the LSAT Unlocked by Kaplan. It made contrapositives super easy to understand, and contrapositives are so important for analytical reasoning and logical reasoning. So yeah, I would highly recommend this book. I know a lot of people speak poorly of Kaplan, but I thought their Logic Games Unlocked book was also really good, so honestly, I would recommend them. But hey, that was my only introduction to it, so who knows? There's probably better introductions to the LSAT. Manhattan Prep reading comprehension saved my life, no cap, because I had no idea how to read. Honestly, I felt like I was illiterate until this book showed me how to read for the scale, and that changed my game. I'm sorry, this is not a sponsorship. I just really like this book, okay? I really recommend it if you're bad at reading comprehension like me. Finally, the Power Score Bibles. I only used the logical reasoning one, but I heard that all three are good. So yeah, go check these out. As for the levels of study, light studying was about 5 hours a week on average, although to be honest, there were some weeks I didn't study at all and some weeks that I studied way too much. I wasn't really doing it for the test. I was doing it more so for fun, I guess. I really liked this stage because I was just learning, like everything was new to me. And so I was doing logic games for fun and checking out books and feeling super cool. Then medium studying was like, actually, okay, I have to do this for real now. And so I was doing Khan Academy drills every day. I was looking for specific resources. And I even got my mom to join me in doing logic games, which was fun because I got to teach her a little bit of what I learned. And finally, during the intense phase, I was just doing tons and tons and tons of practice tests. I was focusing on improving reading comprehension, improving logical reasoning, and analytical reasoning speed because I found myself doing like the first 3 questions and then stopping halfway through the 4th. And finally, I was looking for explanations for specific questions on the practice tests that I got wrong. So that was about 20 hours a week. Figuring out what you need to be competitive. So I talked about the LSAT, but you also have the personal statement, the GPA, the sketch, and references. So here's an example of a personal statement from Osgoode. Some Osgoode students gave me the advice that I should be thinking of it as making an argument for why I should be admitted into their program. So I shouldn't list off my accomplishments, since they'll see this in the sketch, but rather focus on what I've learned from my experiences and ask myself, why did I do it? What have I learned? Here are the minimum requirements for Osgoode, Queens, and U Ottawa. As you can see, 3.7 across the board, and the LSAT is 157s and 160s. Of course, if one is lower than the other, you're still competitive, as long as one offsets the others. These are known as splitters. So someone might have a 3.3 GPA but a 175 LSAT. You're probably gonna stand a decent chance. Or the other way around, you might have a 3.9 GPA but a 155 LSAT. Don't be discouraged from applying because they'll take your stats into account. And it also, if you're eligible, you can consider applying through the access category at Queens and U Ottawa. And Osgoode's process is already holistic, so you really don't need to worry about it at all. How to figure out your GPA. So I mentioned mine was a 3.87, but a 3.91 on my uoft transcript. This is what I used this conversion table. I manually calculated it myself, but there is a calculator that exists if you don't want to make a spreadsheet like I did. All I did was I put my marks in, I put in my the corresponding OSAS value, and then I averaged it out. And yeah, that's my cumulative average. So a sketch is basically your autobiography and all the activities you've done since high school. You can categorize them into these 6 categories: work, volunteer, extracurriculars, awards and accomplishments, research, and other. Um, what was I gonna say? Yeah. Verifiers, sorry, verifiers are the people who can verify that you've actually done these things. So, for example, I was a barista at a bubble tea brand. So, my verifier for that would be my manager. And for extracurriculars, it could be the president of the club. For volunteer, it could be the coordinator, etc. References. Of course, always ask permission before you provide a referee's name and contact information. Include the deadline and be nice about it, and be transparent. So make sure that the referee knows what they're expected to do, and that they have to use an online form to fill out the letter. If they agree, make sure you provide their information accurately, and then the OSAS will take care of the rest, and you can always check the status on OSAS. The recommended formula for references is 2 academic and 1 non-academic. So that's what I'm going for at least, but I know that every school has different requirements. Here are the requirements for my top 3, which is at least 2 references with 1 being academic at Osgoode. Queens demands 3 references with 1 being academic, and Ottawa 2 academic references. Logistics. So obviously this is the deadline. This date should be ingrained in your mind because this is when you have to apply to law school by. If you're still confused, don't worry. This is totally okay. You can join the Law Society at your school or Discord forums such as the Canadian Law Forum. I found this to be super helpful. Also, consciously scroll through Reddit and Facebook. I wrote consciously because there are a lot of people who use these forums to humble brag, and that doesn't do well for your self-esteem if you're doing poorly on the LSAT or you have a poor GPA, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, there are lots of people out there who can help you. Here are some frequently asked questions. Should you cancel your LSAT score? 9 out of 10 times, if not 10 out of 10 times, no, because it's a waste. You paid for that score, you should show it. And honestly, if you're going to take the LSAT again, it shows improvement, and that's good. Should you take the LSAT if you're not ready? No. So I don't think you should cancel LSAT score because I don't think your LSAT score should be low to begin with. You should know going into the LSAT what your score is, unless there's some anomaly, like something happened during your LSAT or you had a brain fog or something. But usually you'll get the same marks that you'll get a mark around, what you've been getting. Does your undergraduate degree matter? Of course not. Actually, diversity is great. So if you're like a music major, I think that will set you apart from the thousands of political science majors that are applying, like me. And how much are the application fees? $100 per school? I'm not actually sure if this is per school program or school, so I have to check that out since I'm applying to multiple programs at the same school. Thank you for listening to my very long presentation. I hope it made the application process a little clearer for you. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.